Hi, everybody. Today's data show is we're going to start a new type of series called Study Scrutiny. And I think this is important to talk about research studies, different aspects, and the idea behind what exactly the studies are for, what the results are, and if those results show any discernible biases. And that's really what our focus is going to be today and in future data shows. Oh, speaking of that, welcome to the Data Show. The Data Show. Welcome. My name is Chris Greco. I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes talking about studies, research studies, because that's what the Data Show does. The Data Show takes a look at studies and scrutinizes them and takes a look at different aspects of the study and exactly what type of biases exist. In the past shows, what I've been doing is I've been trying to figure out how to score the studies and what to do and different validity and verification aspects and everything else. And the bottom line on this whole thing is that it just didn't it just didn't seem to grab the very context of what the research study was about, and it didn't show if there were any biases. So I just want to go over one more time, and I think this is very important, what a bias is, because I think it when we talk about biases, I think that people tend to think of things like discrimination, things like prejudice, areas like that, and that's really not what this type of bias is. And I think that is what we first have to take a look at. So what we're going to take a look at is bias. Very simple aspect of what sometimes these research studies go into. And all when we're talking about bias, we're talking about something within the study itself that tends to skew that study to a certain type of result, or in essence, makes the study possibly unverifiable and certainly not as valid as it would be if it was objective. And that's where bias is really, sometimes it's very it has an underlying aspect to the whole thing. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to start out with this very specific idea of brain boosters. We talk about brain boosters, we talk about these supplements that are supposed to increase cognitive health. And it's interesting to note that sometimes what happens in these supplements is that they are you have this over-promising type aspect to it. And sometimes the advertising goes into that type of aspect. I always tell people, when you're taking a look at advertising for specific supplements or whatever else, read the small print. Because most of the time, like for instance, one brain booster has advertisements, marketing, that bring on people that are literally, the testimonials are, they're recompensed. And it says it right there, that the individual, although may not be an actor, is paid for their testimonial. Right there, you have a bias, because people that are not volunteering the information, they're saying, well, I'll give you the information, but you got to pay me for it, tend to want to say good things about the product. So that's where you have a problem, and that's where there's an issue with that whole thing. So we're going to discuss two separate brain boosters. The first one we're going to discuss now, and then the one on the next show. And we'll go into the different categories, and we'll understand why each study has some issues, and we'll go into some of those issues. This is not I'm not a doctor. I am not part of public health. I'm not part of any type of health aspects. So this is not a recommendation or a non-recommendation to take the supplement or not take the supplement. All I'm saying is take a look at the study And in this case, it's one study that has to do with a specific supplement, and then make your own decision. So it's, simply of analysis of its supplement. And remember, this is not a drug. This is a supplement. It's very clear if you read the small print at the bottom of the advertisements that this is not a drug and it's not FDA approved, and that's very important. And we'll also include some reports on each of the supplements. So the following journal article is what we're talking about here, and it talks about this specific supplement. And the information in the presentation will also be taken from this specific study, which is the only study done on the main ingredient to this specific supplement. So let's start with the hypothesis. Well, the article that talked about the supplement, they just wanted to see why the supplement was the #1 supplement chosen by pharmacists, right? And in addition to this, they also wanted to reveal if the supplement does improve cognitive health as it's advertised, using its main ingredient, which is taken from jellyfish. The ingredient is you will go in. Well, actually, the ingredient, if you go back, you can see the ingredient is here. This is the ingredient right here. That's just based on jellyfish. So that's what we're doing. Now, the original hypothesis of the one clinical study performed and referenced above, that second reference, was testing cognitive health in relationship to the ingredient that is in the supplement. So that's, in other words, the supplement was not clinically studied. The ingredient was clinically studied. So that makes it even more interesting when you take a look at that. So what's a sampling method? So the article mentioned that there was a single clinical study performed on the ingredient of the supplement. So the study was randomized, performed as a double-blind study. Now, double-blind means that both the participant and the researcher do not know who's getting the actual supplement or the ingredient and who's getting a placebo. So that's where double-blind comes into play. I was a part of a double-blind study having to do with vascular stents. So that was interesting because they didn't know if I was getting the stent with the drug in it or not, didn't have the drug in it, that type of thing. So that's what it is, and you can read a little bit about it here. The sampling yielded a total of 218 people, right? 178 female, 40 males. Right there, 178 females, 40 males. And they had self-reported memory concerns. Now, this is extremely important. That's why I had it in quotes. Self-reported memory concerns. Anytime that you see a study that says self-reporting, there's automatically a bias that is inserted into there. Self-reporting is very, very, it's can be very shaky, especially when it comes to clinical aspects. We'll go into that. We'll go into that a little bit later. Mean age was approximately 63 years old. They rounded up. I rounded that up. It was 62.5 or something like that, with a range of 40 to 91 years of age for the participants. And we'll talk about that. Data definitions. And this is the one area that is really, really important when you talk about data analysis. We talk about studies. The data that is taken, the variables that are in there, extremely important to make sure that those are defined properly and consistently. Properly and consistently, very, very important for data definitions. So the main definition, a vital definition, cognitive function, right? In order to detect increase in cognitive health or not, right? So this was done with a method called Cogstate Research Test Battery. And you can find that at that site. I don't like to go into those types of things in the show. I feel that this is, I don't mean to make a homework type aspect, but I think by kind of driving you towards that you can learn something from the data show as much as I'm learning things presenting you the data show. One of the methods in the use of the Cogstate was what they call the International Shopping List. Now, the International Shopping List is interesting because it's simply hearing words that would resemble products that you may buy, and literally a shopping list. And that's what it is. And I took a look at this. You can even take a look at this at the International Shopping List. There's an interactive example you can go through, and you can actually see it. And what happens is you take a look at this, or you have somebody say it to you, and then you have to say the list back as many words as you can. So usually I think it's 8 that they have there. The other definition was whether participants were cognitively impaired or normal, even at the start. This was the outset. This is the outset with the participants using a tool called AD8, or 8-item informant interview to differentiate aging and dementia. So this is the tool here, and these are the AD8 interview guide members. And it's interesting because, I mean, these 8-item informants is really interesting because it's really basically 8 questions. And what happens is that the participant will answer those questions, and the questions are pretty general questions. I mean, there's nothing really extremely hard about that. It's just that they do have a list, and those lists are, exactly what those have to do. So it's really interesting from the standpoint of doing that. And I just want to make sure that you understand that's what we're talking about. And if you want to get that listing, whatever it is, you just put it here, right here. In fact, we'll just do this right now, and we'll see if it'll actually come up and give it to me. See, there it is. All right, so this is, and we'll just show it to you real quick. This is what we're talking about, the AD8 dementia screening, right? Who can take it, and you can just see it right here. How to license it, it goes into different aspects, patients, partners, events, more. You can see exactly what is Knight Alzheimer Disease Research Center, and it'll show it to you. 8-item inform to differentiate was developed as a brief instrument to help discriminate between signs of normal aging and mild dementia. That's it. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about. So now look at this. Cut points are normal cognition 0, 1, impairment cognition 2 or greater. This is extremely important, and I think that when we talk about that, that's what we're going to get to. Is you see here the single study in question considered cognitive normal with a score of 0 to 2. While those with some cognitive impairment with a score of 2 to 5. Well, normally it's 0 to 1. And also, if you have 2 here and 2 here, what is it? Is it cognitive impairment, or is it cognitive normal? So that's where this thing gets really confusing. So that's where you have some issues. Statistical tests. Very straightforward. Basically, the number of words that they were able to remember, and number of words they were able to come back with, and that they took the average of those over a period of time, over a period of testing. And so the groups were split into treatment group, placebo group, but again, who received the supplement was unknown by either participation or the staff. Now, parametric versus non-parametric. Are we talking about, what kind of tests are we talking about? Parametric means that it's based on the normal standard curve, standard normal curve. Non-parametric means it's not based on normality, normal curve aspects. And that's what this means right here. In this case, because the measure was both means and standard deviations, it followed that the researchers wanted a parametric measure. Now, sometimes you have to assume normal curve, right? Where it may not be a normal curve. And that's where sometimes the confusion exists, and you're talking about possible bias. Leaning towards averages or means can hurt the overall results, and we'll describe that in the next section, the reason why. Robust versus not robust. Robust measures means that measure, that statistical measure, is not influenced by very high or very low values. Not robust means the results are affected by very high or very low values. So that could be an issue. And that's what we're talking about here. Highly influenced by high and low values. Because of this, the statistical test being based on mean can lead to bias in the results because of high or low values existing within the test protocol, because it skews those results left or right. This is a big problem. And this is something I pointed out in prior data shows. Mean and standard deviation is like, it's boom. It's what we're going to do. Mean, standard deviation, mean, standard deviation. Standard deviation is based on the mean. The mean is not a robust measure, so standard deviation is not a robust measure. It's really interesting how people stay away from the median. They don't do the median. The median would be better. Why? Because it's a robust measure. It's not influenced by high and low values. And people say, well, you can't use a standard deviation with a median. No, but you can do a median absolute deviation, which can help, again, to, I'm just going to put this down here. Look this up. I mean, it's it is really interesting how median absolute deviation can take the median and you can use it in the same way you can use a standard deviation. So that's all I'm saying is I don't understand why they don't use median. Why are they so bent and determined to use the mean? I don't get it. Confounding factors or bias, and we'll talk about the bias aspects here in a second. Confounding factors. Confounding factors mean that when an individual is brought into a clinical study, they may have other maladies, they may have other symptoms, they may have other situations physically that can affect the results of the test because of confounding factors. Maybe they already have dementia, or maybe they don't have dementia. Maybe they're getting dementia. Maybe they have Parkinson's. Maybe they have, maybe there are things that, maybe there's type of medications they're taking. That can definitely factor into the bias aspect. So the main confounding factor in this reference study from the article was that all the participants were from the same community from one US state. Think about that for just 1 second. If all of my participants in one study is from one community, no matter how randomized they were taken, they're still from the same community. Now, if that same community has does it have the same water supply? Does it have the same environmental factors? Is it a farming area? Is it, do they use pesticides? There's a ton of confounding factors that are thrown in there. And this volunteer bias is very, very, this is where I get all the biases from, catalogofbias.org. It's done by, it's based on Archie Cochran, who was a physician. And he determined that some of these clinical studies had biases and starts to list them. There's got to be 30, 40 of them in there. Also, there was no baseline conducted at the beginning of the study and showed there was no difference between the control and treatment group. Oh, there was a baseline. I'm sorry. There was a baseline conducted at the beginning of the study, which is good. That's a good thing. However, as stated in the study, there was no control from medications that the participants were already taking, along with the actual dosing times. They weren't controlling that. So they weren't, were they taking the drug? Weren't they taking the drug? Were they reporting they were taking the drug, but they weren't really taking the drug? So all that was not controlled. And they pointed that out in limitations. To be very honest with you as an audience, they pointed that out in the study. So there were some limitations in the study that they pointed out. And they did. And all participants were from one community. All participants self-reported concerns. Medications that the participants were already taking were not recorded. Dosing requirements during the study, they weren't following the regimen. And any conflict of interest among the researchers was not made clear one way or the other. I didn't see it in the study. I may have been there, but I just didn't see it. So, that is a main concern when we talk about conflict of interest, because if the researchers are in any way, shape, or form connected to the company that is making the ingredient to put in a supplement, that could be a real issue. So that's a problem. So, summary. Here are some of the biases, except for confidence interval omission. That's based they're all based on a catalog of biases. You can look it up. Catalog of biases. Confounding bias. Medications taken by the participants were that could be an issue. Selection bias. Study included only those from community. So that could be a distinct problem. Recall bias, right? Participants self-reported any cognitive issues, but the self-reporting could omit something that was important that they either forgot to mention, or they misremembered, or they literally didn't want to list that. So they, because they were scared, maybe they were scared they were not going to get picked for the study, so they didn't list that stuff. Confidence interval omission. This is important, and it's not a bias. Most studies, if you take a look at them, have what they call a confidence interval, usually 95%. And what this does is this says that if the study was done infinitely, that the mean somewhere would be within that 95%, that the buffer area between negative and positive, above and below the mean. And that's important to understand, because if that's a 0, then that means there is no difference between the treatment group and the actual the treatment group and the control group. So that could be a problem. And volunteer bias. These participants were volunteers. It could be a problem, right? Could make them different from the general population, because only those that were selected were, you have to take into consideration what is the average, and I hate to say average, but that's literally what all these studies are based on. What's the average score on cog state, right? When we talk about 0 to 2, 2 to 5, whatever it is. So that could be an issue. So limited use study at best. Supplement was later challenged in court, the actual supplement, and these are the ones that ordered them. Federal Trade Commission did that. So it's evident that although the ingredient which was tested was only in one trial, and that trial had its issues, the supplement did not work according to the marketing, according to the cases that were brought against that specific supplement. So that's, it's not so much that it hurts you, that there's a problem with taking it from the standpoint of, people having side effects, but it just doesn't do what the advertising says it does. And it's interesting, and this is something that was brought up. Why was it that this is the number one pharmacist chosen, whatever you want to call it, pharmacist recommended? It found out that the reason was because that's exactly the advertising that was done was so heavy that the pharmacist recognized the supplement immediately. So that's why it was a number one pharmacist recommended supplement. So this is an actual quote from Samuel Levine, Director of Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Customer Protection, in December 10th, 2024, from the Federal Trade Commission site. And it was part of a press release. And this is what we're talking about. Please, the court has ordered Quincy Bioscience to cease making claims about this supplement that misled Americans concerned about memory loss. Companies should take note and remember that health claims need to be backed up by reliable scientific evidence. So that is what we're talking about, and that is something that you have to sit back and say, especially when we talk about supplements. There's a lot of supplements out there, a lot of advertising aspects. You have to take a look at the study. You have to take a look and see what that study has to do with, what did it do, what did it have, and be able to sit back and intelligently take a look and make sure that these situations are something that you can, in fact, go to this supplement and take this supplement and understand that it may not do exactly what it's advertised to do. And unfortunately, this company really got hit hard because the advertising just did not match the actual results. And and that's why it's really, really important to understand studies and to go and take a look at the studies. Folks, you're going to say, I'm not a statistician, Chris. I'm not a data analyst. I can't, I don't have the experience you have from that. But you can read the study, read it. If there's something in there that's just not right or just doesn't seem right to you, you can take a look at, um, you can go to my site, my website, or my gosh, you can certainly, please, I'm here for you. Um, Take a look, email me. I mean, more than happy to answer if I can't answer your questions, I will research it and I will get back to you. Email me if you have a question about a study or you want me to cover it on the show. I'd be more than happy to do that. Be more than happy to do that. But right now, what we're going to do on this show from now on is whenever we're taking a look at a study, we're going to take a look at it in relationship to the catalog of biases. And if the bias exists, or if there's something there that you need to take a look at from the bias aspect, then we need to do that and make sure that that study passes that muster. It's got to pass your muster, folks. The news, the media will take these studies and they will make news because that's their job, is to make news. It used to be report news. Now it's make news because that's clicks. So you have to take a look at that and say, is this study really everything it's meant to be? And look at those studies. And again, email me. Email me and let me know, and I will take a look at the study. I'd be more than happy to do that. So that's really about it for today. And next time we'll take a look at another brain booster. And also, in one of the future shows, we'll take a look at the FAA. The FAA has this whole, I don't know how to even explain it. It's a statistical tool to try to figure out weight and balance and baggage aspects. I don't want to go through that and show you how using non-robust measures can really jam up the system. And with the FAA, we're talking about weight and balance issues. That could be, that could be something that might affect you whenever you're flying, or you have some bags or whatever else happens. So we'll discuss that a little bit and go from there. So in the meantime, I just want to say thank you very much for watching. And by all means, whatever you do, absolutely make sure to check the data. And I will be back next month with another data show. Have a great, great, great month. And I hope you all had a great Easter. Take care.